Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 35th webinar, Energizing Your Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency with our customized 90-day action plan utilizing AI and ML. We appreciate you taking the time today to attend Enhance International's webinar on building evolving resilient enterprise, especially in light of the continued coronavirus pandemic. Hopefully those restrictions have lifted where you're at and you're getting closer to normal. This is the fifth webinar in our series on the supply chain risk and resiliency 90-day action plan series. The first webinar provided an overview. It's on our website. The second webinar focused on the maturity model. So if you want more details on that, please look at that webinar. And then the third webinar focused on the risk appetite. And our fourth webinar, our last webinar, focused on operational propensity. And today's webinar is really trying to wrap it all up to put it together as far as how does all this information get compiled into the 90-day action plan and how to make this part of your program. Again, the assessment is 90 online questions that take about 20 minutes. That provide that 90-day action plan. We look forward to the webinar, and your feedback during the webinar is very crucial for us. So we look forward to that. Remember to go to the chat box and click on the link poev.com/Jim DeVries 073. Again, my name is Jim DeVries, president of Enhance International Group. EIG is a platform of 40 plus consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce to expand and sustain your organization. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, positive margin growth, your competitive advantage. We hope you find this information useful to you and your teams. Again, we have all the webinars posted on the EIG website, and we welcome your questions, any follow-up at any time of these webinars. So just as a recap of our upcoming webinars, we have a webinar next week on the continuing our series on artificial intelligence, visual insight for safety. Then we'll be getting into a fireside chat on new product introduction and digitization in July. And then quite a number of webinars in the latter part of July, including discussion on the differences between lean and supply chain risk management. We'll make that a fireside chat. We'll resume our de-risking with of large scale projects with a demo. We'll also be looking at digital twins. We'll be doing a demo there. So lots of demos next month, demos and fireside chats. And then we'll be back here at the end of the month on how to make this supply chain risk and resiliency a priority for your company. With that, I'd like to introduce Greg Schlegel, our guest speaker today. He's the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. Greg is a celebrated speaker who provides many presentations throughout the year. So we're honored to have him here today. And he's the author of the book, Supply Chain Risk Management and Emerging Discipline, which is really a staple out there in supply chain risk and resiliency. So Greg, a few words.
Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here with you to talk about our passion today. Again, the consortium is a group of, I think, 30 companies at the moment, and they bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and solutions that help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risk. So pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the dialogue.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for leading the charge here. Appreciate it. Just going through our agenda here, a recap of our previous webinars that I mentioned. It's on a slide. And again, we're focused today on really developing that 90-day action plan, your tailored supply chain risk and resiliency game plan, or some people call it the journey. And next webinar will be on how to make this a priority for your company. With that, the agenda, Greg.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Couple of items on our agenda today, so we'll kind of give you a thumbnail sketch. First, we'll talk a little bit about the VUCA world, and we'll share with you the impetus in terms of why the tool, why we built the tool. So that's the first agenda item. We'll talk to that. Secondarily, again, we'll talk a little bit more about the 90-90-20. What does that stand for? 90-day action plan from 90 questions, taking you and your team probably around 20 to 30 minutes. Then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. We'll talk about the SCR&R assessment action plan tool. There's several elements. First element is insights on maturity, then risk appetite, and then operational propensity. Personas will share with you the graphs that come out of the survey answers. We'll also talk a little bit about what we call developing the execution strategies, which are the personas that come out of the report as well. And then we'll talk a little bit more about action items, and then finish up with what we consider the compelling reasons to act, to get engaged, and go through the assessment. We'll talk about what do you get, and then what do we ask for? And again, 90-90-20. And at the moment, this we're still in beta, so we're offering this opportunity at $500 versus the $3,500 street value at the moment. So that's more or less our agenda items. And again, we look forward to your feedback, especially relative to the polling questions. We said we'd talk about VUCA and the impetus for the tool. So what is VUCA? All right, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Let's go through each one. Volatility first. This describes something that is liable to vary or change, sometimes very quickly and often for the worse. What is this at the moment? This is COVID, friends, and the wonderful world of government lockdowns. Uncertainty. This is a state of not knowing or being able to rely on something. What is that? Those are all the demand and supply shocks that we all have been living with since March of 2020 because of the above. Complexity. This can be defined as something with many parts in an intricate arrangement. What is that? That's our supply chains. We don't have chains anymore. They don't look like a chain. They don't run in linear fashion. They are multi-faceted networks, all right? And based on relationships. So that's the complexity part. And then ambiguity, something is ambiguous if it is open to more than one interpretation. That, folks, is all of the above elements wrapped up in one. That's what we are living with at the moment, the VUCA landscape. So what was the impetus to develop this tool? Essentially, first and foremost, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. And then what we have seen, and we like to use the phrase coming out of one of McKinsey's risk reports last November, is the COVID-19 pandemic has once again driven home the necessity of managing operational and supply chain risks. It has catapulted these issues to the top of CEOs' agendas, and the unexpected now has to be considered probable. We thought that was pretty compelling at the end of last year. Couple other impetus to develop: our inability to sit with companies and lead, guide, direct, and coach them within their company hallways. None of us can get in to any client or prospect or partner. It's been very difficult for the last 12 months. And then finally, again, the last impetus was the staggering and uneven negative impact of the pandemic on manufacturers, perhaps like you, due to artificial demand and supply shocks from the pandemic. So we shared historically in the previous webinars, we've shared many negative impacts from a financial point of view across all industry sectors, just so you're aware. They are in the previous webinars. All right. So what's the market saying at the moment? We wanted to utilize a recent Gartner assessment of the marketplace coming out of 2020 and talking about 2021. So these are recent findings, again, from a C-suite survey at the end of 2020. On the left side of the graph or the slide is a question from Gartner. What do CEOs want their supply chains to focus on in 2021? And we'll go through top down in a moment, but what we thought interesting is for the first time in a long time, Gartner heard this from their survey respondents. They said CEOs want their supply chains to first ensure business continuity and sustainable margins, and then secondarily strive to capture growth. That's the first time we've seen that in a while. That was pretty compelling to us. On a top-down basis, you can take a look. From a top-down, cost optimization, number one. Supply chain resilience, great, that's great. It's encouraging to us as evangelists. Supply chain optimization, commercial enablement, and then inventory optimization. On the right side of the graph is another question with a set of answers. And that question was, what do CEOs think about regions representing the greatest opportunity or drag on growth going forward in 2021 and 22? The black bars on the graph represent a drag by region, and the blue bars on the right represent growth. This is an opinion, but across a couple of hundred of executives. And again, the takeaway to us is the sentiments from the CEOs were, for the foreseeable future, it seems to make more sense to us to place more sales and supply chain effort into countries with strong economies, or at least those expected to rapidly emerge from the pandemic, and reducing our efforts in those with ongoing challenges. So we wanted to give you a sense of now what's going on out there in the marketplace. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So the marketplace is certainly recognizing supply chain risk and resiliency as a top topic. You can watch CNN or any marketing channel on the stock market, from Fox to CNN to every network. They're all talking about supply chain risk and resiliency. It's becoming part of a everyday vocabulary, especially on the stock market. It's very interesting. So with that impotence for this, just a quick review of the plan, the journey, the tool of how it's used. So again, we will provide this 90-day action plan via an online survey. The questions are very quick to be able to be completed, even though there's 90 questions. It generally takes 20, maybe 25 minutes to complete. What we're looking for from each of the companies to participate would be about 7 hours total investment over 3 months. So not a lot of time to an effort in order to get up to speed with where you're at and help you on your journey. and give you a bit of a guidebook on where you can go with your 90-day action plan. So we ask questions about maturity. Where are you? And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Who are you from a risk appetite perspective? And then how do you operate, your operational propensity, as we call it. And then the 90-day action plan, which is the focus of today's webinar. And so we have the designated lead onboarding call. We look for at least 3 stakeholders in your company. If it's a small company, if it's a larger company, we'd like to see 5 to 8 stakeholders. And these are the key decision makers that have to do with your supply chain. And that's everybody from finance to finance, sales, of course, logistics, operations, procurement. Those types of individuals is what we're looking, the leaders that are making those key decisions. And then we'll return the 90-day action plan and have our first real meeting about the results and the items which we recommend, and we'll go through those in a few minutes. And then we'll have checkpoint calls to confirm if the 90-day action plan that we provide is fruitful, if it needs to be adjusted, if there's points of clarity, we will support that. And then, after 30 days, are you on track? Is it working? And then another pulse check, and then a closeout on what's next. So that's the overview of the tool. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter it in the chat or follow up with Greg and I after this webinar. As we move to the next section, we'll be really focused on, again, the maturity, risk appetite, and operational propensity personas. So we call these personas as a combination of these 3 analyses to get you that overall persona of what is the best action plan to fit your organization. And then that'll help you build your overall supply chain risk and resiliency execution strategy. I'm sure you have one today, but this will help embolden it and hopefully align to what you're working on today. And then again, this 90-day action plan is all about what you need to do now. So there may be things that you want to do sooner than later, but we might say, well, you might want to scale it back on those items and focus more on these items, because you need to build that foundation before you go and do some of the tools that are out there that you might see advertised. So we want to set you up for success. That's our goal. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We'll start with the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. This is a 5-stage model. I'll give you a thumbnail sketch of some descriptions of each stage, and then I think we have a polling question for you. So this model has been used to build our entire body of knowledge. Our book is totally geared around this model, and so we'll go through it real quick. On the y-axis, supply chain risk and resiliency maturity from low to high. On the x-axis, competitive advantage from 0 to infinity. All right, and then the 5 stages. What are they? Foundational. Think of it this way: education and awareness. All right, education and awareness. You have to start somewhere. Second stage is visibility. What does that mean? That means you are building and or have visibility in your supply chain upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers and everything else in between. That's visibility. Third, predictability. Sense and respond. This is where we advocate at this time that you digitize your supply chain. You get into supply chain mapping. You digitize it using digital twins. They're out there. You then have a digital model. Why? To run what-if scenarios, to essentially develop scenarios to see how each scenario impacts your supply chain, to witness how your supply chain will react. And then you essentially make mitigation plans. Resiliency, 4th stage. That's where you begin to embed all the tools, techniques, methodologies, solutions that we talk about in our body of knowledge, embed them into your regular daily supply chain lives. And then sustainability is, how do I sustain the journey enterprise-wide? And then we advocate one of the frameworks called ERM. All right, so those are the 5 modules or stages. It's a maturity curve. You'll hear us talk about the mantra up top: identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks. That's our mantra. On the bottom, you can see we superimpose a heat map based on where you are in the maturity model from high risk. The second major element of the 90-day action plan and tool is providing you a picture image of your risk appetite. This is what we call risk appetite perspectives. Remember, risk perspectives are driven by only 2 drivers: your personal risk experience in your career and where you reside, position-wise, hierarchical and/or department, based on where you are positioned in your company. We've been doing this for 12 years. To us, when we ask a professional what their risk perspective is, it's driven normally by those 2 elements. So what are you looking at? All right, let's take a look. On the y-axis is what we call the risk viewpoint, or your tolerance for risk, from low on the bottom, almost negative, to very high positive approach towards risk. So it's low to high in terms of your risk viewpoint. On the x-axis are risk management decision tactics. These are tactics that tend to support the 4 ovals that you see in the graph. Those are what we call risk perspectives. All right, what are they? We'll go through them real quick, and then I think we have a polling question as well. The brown on the lower left are pragmatists. What's that? Those are folks who wait until the very last moment to decide, basically being reactive when it comes to risk management. All right, again, no good or bad, right or wrong answer, just different. Second one are conservators, the blue on the bottom. Their biggest concern is avoiding a loss, so they're very careful to essentially avoid risk to the bottom line. Those are conservators. Third one, managers up in the middle. They're careful to balance risk and rewards. They utilize many tools and techniques to identify, assess, and mitigate risks. It's the true ERM type of approach. Those are called managers. And then on the far right, on the top, are maximizers. What are they? What's their perspective? Big risks, big reward. Go for the gusto. They're very proactive. They want to get that big reward. They understand the risk, but they want the big reward before their competitor gets that award or that reward. So essentially, we wanted to plot the 4 perspectives on a 2x2 and kind of give you a couple of definitions.
Yeah, it's me. I'll go over the famous kite drawing. How do you operate? And on the y-axis here, you have speed index from slow to fast, stability and control, efficient to collaborative. And then on the second y-axis, agility from weak to strong. And then external focus and differentiates on the top x-axis from narrow to broad. So this is basically how do you operate? Again, this is based on a framework that's been around for over 50 years by Cameron. So when we focusing on the personas today, you know, we start in the bottom left and we talk about the bureaucratic, you know, and that is that hierarchical, structured, controlled, coordination, efficient stability, controlling orientation, generally fairly slow in speed, but it's very efficient and stable and controlled. So a lot of the companies I worked with were in that area. Then the next is what we call clannish or trapped. It's not bad. Don't get hung up on the words. It's hard to describe these different types of propensities. This is when there's extended company division monitoring, nurturing, collaborative orientation with weak agility and collaboration, stability, and control. So it's very much like a clan would operate. That's why it says clannish. There's a lot of companies that can be very successful operating that way. And then third is agile or autocracy. And for that one, we're talking about, it's dynamic, entrepreneurial, risk-taking, values innovation, very creative in orientation. And then the last one is more of a startup entrepreneurial mindset where it's market-based, results-oriented. I tend to think of M&A companies in this quadrant if they are startup. Now, the interesting thing is when looking at how these results come out, have two tails or a single tail, or all four could be strong. And we'll look at a couple of those as our examples. Again, there's no right and wrong, just like the other you are. And these are the parameters or the guide rails that you will operate in as you roll out that 90-day action plan. So what happens is from the survey results, we'll have the where you are, who you are, and how you operate. And we call them personas because it's a combination of these three. And if you look at all the combinations, it comes out to about 88 different combinations. And from our experience over the last 10 years in deploying and building supply chain risk and resiliency strategies and action plans for our clients, we then look at what are the actual actions that we would recommend from there. So with that, we'll go into our first case here, Greg.
Yep, you bet. Thanks, Jim. We said we'd share some persona insights with you from beta companies that have already gone through the analysis and the survey. So we have three. The first is CPG, consumer packaged goods. All right. And for the first time, we're putting all three of the output graphs in front of you, and then we'll talk about the 90-day insights that would come out of this persona. On the left is the maturity model. That's and you'll see it's identified. This company is identified at the beginning stages of visibility, all right, based on their answers. In the middle, we have the risk appetite. You can see the four perspectives again on the 2x2, like we showed you early on, and they happen to be what we call pragmatist conservator. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, how could you have more than one risk appetite? You can. Trust us. You certainly can. And as you can see, that CPG company tends to touch a few. It can happen. It touches pragmatist, conservator, and even a little bit manager, but we call them at the moment a pragmatist conservator. All right. And then over on the right-hand side, you have your operational propensity, or what's the shape of your kite. And at this point in time, you can see it is a double-tailed kite. And the question you might have is, how can you have two tails? You can. In fact, what we see in this outcome from this company is obviously this company has what we call creative tension, perhaps, between maybe more than one camp, maybe two camps, startup, bureaucratic, startup, bureaucratic. So they could have what we call creative tension, that is push and pull back and forth with certain camps within that organization. Again, no right or wrong answer, but we wanted to share these together coming out of a company's response to the survey. So what's it mean in terms of persona and the 90-day plan? I think we will share with you what this plan could look like based on that persona. All right. They're invisibility, they're a pragmatist conservator, they're bureaucratic and startup with a two-tailed kite, and therefore we would probably recommend something like this. Perhaps they would take some education and get into one of our 2 online courses. That might be one course of action from an education point of view. Secondarily, we might recommend if you don't feel comfortable with online training, you could essentially perhaps purchase the book. There are a few more. The third type of action plan might be, you might want to think about mapping the supply chain based on how you answered for what product line and division. You might want to begin to map the supply chain either manually in a group conference approach or digitally, as we talked about. But our comment might be, think big, longer term, start small with mapping a particular product line and then implement it quick. There's a couple others that might come out of this persona. You might want to identify key suppliers from the mapping scope exercise and exercise what we call the Altman Z-score. You may or may not be familiar, but the Altman Z-score, it's free, it's out there. The calculations are in some of our previous webinars on the EIG website, and it is a financial health mechanism, set of algorithms that have over a 90% accuracy rate in terms of predicting bankruptcy 12 to 15 months into the future. So that's what we might recommend for that item. There's a few more. You might want to secure a sponsor. Remember, you're in visibility mode. You're a little bit beyond foundational. You might want to secure a sponsor for funding and for and a supply chain risk and resilience lead for the journey. Then you might want to investigate maybe a risk alert software as a service solution. There are many out there now that are capturing risk events and passing those risk events electronically to their subscribers, all in an effort to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage. And then maybe integrate it with the existing solutions that from the 90-day action plan objective. So again, those could be 6 that might come out based on this persona and this one was from a CPG company. Jim, back to you.
Great, Greg. So the next example is from one of our exemplars. As Greg has shared in past webinars, we've interviewed quite a number of exemplars out there to see what they're doing. And this is a software hardware company that we have been working with in the past, and they're fairly mature. So they're, from a maturity level perspective, they're in that sustainability. They're trying to ensure that what they built over the last 10 plus years is going to continue and it does not come apart. And then, their risk appetite, they have a product or sets of products, I should say, that requires them to be maximized in their way that they treat risk. Due to the competitive nature of the market. Every market's different, but you can imagine, a competitive market in that software hardware area. It's very, very competitive, very fast moving. If you sit, you lose. And that company is also looking at agile. But you also see even in the operational propensity graph that although agile is dominant, They do operate in clans in different areas, focused on key deliverables, I would imagine, key product lines. And then they're still operating as startup because they want to keep current with all the latest. So, but they are they're more an agile company. They would view themselves that way. So what does this mean as far as action plans? What are they doing? What are the exemplars doing in this area? So the first thing is, they're maintaining that sponsorship, making sure that there's continues to be funding for the supply chain risk and resiliency team, their efforts. And it's top part of their agenda up through the board. And then the KRIs, the key risk indicators, are owned at the executive level all the way down to the frontline managers. So that's what we call a KRI hierarchy, from the high level down to the operational level. Everybody knows their place. Everybody knows the triggers on those KRIs. They're linked to that risk alerts system that Greg mentioned in the first one. So those metrics are part and parcel of the way they live and make decisions. The next area that they focus on is, reinforcing the existing and drive new enterprise risk incentives to reinforce good risk management behavior for the enterprise. So continually to look at this all the time, making those metrics visible, and then build incentives behind those metrics, not just have the metrics, but incentivize people to make the right decisions. Then the next item is implement staged implementation of ERM GRC, and that's a long journey. Although they've been around for over 10 years, doing performing supply chain risk and resiliency, the enterprise risk management, and the governance behind it is a continued focus for them, because it's hard to maintain that. If you take your eye off the ball on that, it can crumble very quickly. And then the next one for them is maintaining, evolve, and embedded best practices across the business, making sure that as we learn, because we are evolving, technology is evolving, there's bigger and better things available, especially with artificial intelligence. There's more best practices being used across, especially in this pandemic recovery. How do we recover? All those best practices need to be collated and front and center for the business to help them in their business decision making. And then the next one is constantly review the tools and techniques and solutions to ensure their readiness and efficacy. So, readiness is key. Time is money. So we want to make sure that these tools are doing what they need to, so we can be faster and faster than our nearest competitor. So that's foremost on their mind, making sure that they have those tools. And of course, the real-time visibility to show that return on investment, so that the program is always sustaining itself. There's a clear return on investment for the executives, so it doesn't come off the radar screen. So if you have any questions on that one, or have anything to add, Greg, on that overview?
No, that's good. That's obviously they're in a different position with a different persona.
And they're taking on a lot more. And I kind of stopped at 7, but of course your scenario planning and maintaining all that is very important. So they have a lot on their plate, but they can handle all that. So you can see that for a very mature company, we would give them a lot to do to make sure that all the checks and balances are there. Whereas when you're starting off the journey, you're evolving, and we tone it down because you're trying to build that business case for the supply chain risk and resiliency. So the last one, Greg, will do together. This is, again, another exemplar that we work closely with for many years. Greg, do you want to provide the overview here?
Well, sure. This is someone a company who is up there in sustainability, the far right. They've been working on supply chain risk management for maybe 10 years. So not surprised that they are at the top of the maturity in sustainability. They're a high tech, so they're somewhat on the maximizer. They touch a little bit of manager, but you can see their oval sits basically in the top right hand quadrant, and so they're a maximizer. And then they tend to have something a little different. Call it clannish, but it's a box kite. And again, the question is, if you've ever flown a kite, they're pretty good. They're fairly stable, but this says that this company is doing has multiple threads and multiple approaches, and they seem to be doing them pretty well. All right, they seem to be pretty good in managing multiple threads between a startup, being bureaucratic, being trapped, and being agile. So very interesting. We call it a box kite. So what does that mean in terms of what we might recommend for them in an action item? So there's their persona, pretty stable, maximizer. They got a box kite, so they're doing a lot of good things. One, we might advocate maintain your sponsorship for funding and the SCR&R. You always have to over communicate that. So we would say that right out of the blocks. Second one, maybe you want to reinforce existing ERM incentives and drive to reinforce good risk management behavior throughout the enterprise. So how do you sustain the journey? That's what we would recommend, perhaps. Third one, maybe build out your staged implementation of ERM GRC. There are tools out there. There are solutions. We don't recommend you start there, but when you get into the journey, we would recommend that you should probably think about a solution approach if you want to take this enterprise-wide to sustain the journey. All right. The fourth one would be perhaps continue to embed good SCR&R best practices. And the reason we say continue is this is a dynamic arena. This space is only 15 years old. It's very new. It's embryonic. There are new tools, techniques, and solutions coming out every day. That's why we say continue to embed best practices. Fifth one could be maybe you review all your tools, techniques, and solutions to ensure their readiness and, again, efficacy. And that basically says you have to stay on top of evaluating your SCR&R processes. Number six would be, again, real-time visibility. Just keep modifying and improving your real-time visibility throughout your supply chain, and communicate. And then finally, maybe make sure you develop and maintain the what we call SCR&R intranet sites. Many exemplars have their own intranet site inside their firewall, and recommend the pros go in, take some exams, maybe once every 6 months, get a refresher course, and it tends to be a vehicle for communication, constant communication. You cannot over communicate with this type of journey. That's how we see that persona in terms of graphs and perhaps an action plan. All right.
Hopefully that provided everyone some insight into the overall program. As we've worked with different clients, we certainly have some challenges. Greg will share with you some of those challenges, and then some helpful hints afterwards.
You bet. You're going to have challenges. And that's the reason why when you look at our 90-day process flow, that once you have the report, then essentially we have checkpoint calls every 30 days to kind of lead, guide, direct, and coach, and make sure that you have a successful journey within the 90 days. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have challenges with the company vision. That is, what's the end game, the journey. You're going to have to articulate that. You're going to have a challenge with leaderships, meaning you've got to get commitment. You're going to have a challenge on alignment across the organization. That's essentially collaboration and what's in it for me outside of your team. You're going to have to get sponsorship for two reasons: executive cover, we all know that, and funding. You're going to get challenges from a risk appetite point of view because you're going to have to understand what your product line division or enterprise's risk appetite really is. You need to understand that because you're a change agent. And then you'll also need to have a working knowledge of your operational propensity, which is really your culture. All right. So those are some of the challenges you're going to have during the 90-day process and at any point in time in this journey. We do have a few helpful hints. You can't over communicate. All right. You probably know this. You've been around the block. You got to over communicate what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and then your measurements of progress. Education and awareness, those two go together to build your foundation. You're going to continually have to do that. A burning platform, what does that mean? That means if you've been burnt in any way, shape, or form by a supply chain disruption, that to us is what we call a burning platform, meaning never, ever, ever allow this to happen again. How do we do that? And then finally, alignment with corporate and division goals. We found out through our 12 years that one of the best ways to influence people and make friends, if you're a risk professional inside your organization, is to align certain good best practices in terms of risk. Align them with your corporate division, even company goals, and ensure that other departments and disciplines, business initiatives are successful, and you help mitigate those risks. So those are some quick helpful hints, and I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So just as a recap, again, there's no good or bad persona. Embrace your persona. That's what you will need to work with to navigate and make your successful, make your supply chain risk and resiliency journey successful. And very often, if you have multiple product lines, multiple divisions, you may have multiple personas, and that's okay. We're not here to change anything. We're here to navigate, help you navigate and embed supply chain risk and resiliency in the divisions where you have your highest risks, and then move to the next division. So we're not looking to do the whole company. Don't try to do the whole company at one time. It would be overwhelming. Make sure that whoever that supply chain leader is, if it's a VP or a director or a manager, they need to understand that there's different personas across the different divisions across the company, and that's okay. We're not here to change things. And of course, we know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So link your speed of execution and your expectations to align to your persona. Make sure that that is aligned. And then, of course, managing the personas is essential to your journey. So with that, well, that's a close of that section of the webinar. Just a few words on the compelling reasons to act, just a recap of the 90-day plan. And again, it's 90-day plan with 90 questions, taking 20 minutes. It's a total of about 7 hours of your time to get this detailed plan with you and for you to help your company and make sure that you're on the right path. And we are seeking beta testers right now at $500 for the next 5 beta testers. So we got 5, we need 5 more. And please feel free to visit our website at as it's shown there, and we'll be sending out that link afterwards in the follow-up email. Greg, the get.
You bet. You are probably thinking, what do I get if I give? All right, you get a sense of where you are in the maturity model. All right, we've shown that. You get a sense of who you are in terms of your risk appetite for that particular set of product lines or a division. You essentially get aligned a 90-day action plan to what we would call survive and thrive, especially during the COVID-19 arena. And then we think this kind of outcome basically gives you what we call a strategic advantage. Why? Because you will learn how to know sooner and act faster than your nearest competitor. So we also think it's pretty much a strategic advantage to your bottom line. And there's a bonus benefit. Again, if your company can provide 5 or more executives, the consortium, who runs 2 online courses for the last 2.5 years, will offer your company 1 free pass to any of our courses. We have 2. One's basic and one is for public healthcare supply chains. That's a value, folks, of $1,400, including a certificate from my university, Lehigh. All right. So what's the ask? Again, what do we ask? Well, we ask for 5 to 8 executives to provide independent insight, not groupthink, independent with the 90 questions. The profile of the executives could be executives from departments or disciplines for this, same product line, if you will, but you can take a look at them. We're looking from procurement all the way to sales and continuous improvement and everyone in between. We're looking for diversity in terms of disciplines and departments from a risk perspective point of view. And then essentially, we would ask that those executives are aligned to maybe a simple product line and or the same division, not a corporate across 100 product lines. We'd like to keep it simple at the moment for beta, some type of product line, homogeneous and the same type of division. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Well, that's it for our webinar, and we really appreciate your time and effort to join the webinar today. We will just have a few wrap-up slides. Again, just a reminder of our upcoming webinars. We'll be back here at the end of July for the capstone webinar. We also have an upcoming webinar next week with enabling artificial intelligence, and then because of 4th of July weekend, we're skipping that week, obviously. And then July 15th, we have a webinar on new product introductions, speed to resiliency, focus on digitalization. At the end of the month, we will also be having our second webinar on digital twins. That's pretty exciting. And end of July, there'll be a demo, so you'll actually see it at work, what a digital twin actually looks like and feels like. And we'll resume our de-risking webinar, so we will actually do a demo with new product introduction on de-risking large-scale projects. We're looking at doing a webinar on enabling ERPs to work for you. And we're also looking at webinars, a very interesting fireside chat on discovering the balance and trade-offs of supply chain risk and resiliency and lean. There's certainly a trade-off there. So we're going to have a fireside chat on that in mid-July. So that should be quite fun. And we'll get back to our rapid skills deployment, hopefully next month or the month after. Again, we're organized with people, process, data, technology. That's how we move. We want to be your thought leader source. We have over 100 courses online for you to choose from by our various partners. So please check out the website on that. And this is how we're organized. Again, people, process, data, and technology. These are all the partners. A lot of these partners are providing SaaS solutions. Some are providing training, and some are providing consulting. So we have a very eclectic group, but they're all in it to help you, the customer, perform at a higher level of performance. Greg, do you have any few words on your wrap-up slide here.
I just want to thank everyone for carving out time. We went over a bit, but hopefully we got the message across. We think it's very exciting, especially in light of the landscape that we all live in at the moment. And so I just want to thank everyone for their time today, and all the best on your journeys.
Yes, thank you very much. We really enjoyed having you, and we look forward to joining us in future webinar. Again, thank you for joining, and have a great day.